Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green, where officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film or record audio of the meeting? I would advise that if filming does take place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured, and I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Any speakers using the microphone in the middle may be picked up by the cameras recording the meeting, and members of the public in the gallery behind them may have their image captured that way. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. An item that is of change to the agenda, will members please note that item 5C, Key Edge, Cross Wall and West Pier, Ramsgate Harbour, has been withdrawn from the agenda and will not be determined this evening. This is for the Council to consult with Historic England, as the harbour is a Grade 2 star listed structure. The application will then be reported to a future meeting. Do I have any members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1? No, thank you. I have apologies from Councillors Moore and Bright. Do I have any other apologies? No, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I declare an interest in every item on the agenda as a Cabinet member. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alban. I will tell you when you need to leave the chambers. Minutes of the meeting. Do members agree that minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 15th of October 2025 be approved as a correct record? And can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Alban, and seconder, Councillor Matterface. Thank you. At this point, Councillor Alban, you can leave the meeting.
That's very kind of you, Chair.
As none of the rest of it will apply to you.
Sorry, Chair.
Just note that Councillor Britcher has now arrived. Thank you. It is possible for you to hear Councillor Alban. Any site visits will take place for the committee members on the morning of Friday the 5th of December, should that be determined. And I now will hand over to the Planning Application Manager to update on points of information regarding agenda items 5D and 5E.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So clarification on item 5D, 3 Addington Street. The applicant is incorrectly stated at the start of the report as Thanet District Council. However, the applicant is Miss Annette Claudel Bangara, an employee of the council, which is confirmed in the text of the report, just for information. An update to members on item 5E, Hodges Gap. The report outlines the need for a contribution towards the strategic access and management and monitoring plan to mitigate the impact of recreational disturbance on the special protection area, the Thanet Coast Special Protection Area. This has now been calculated as a contribution of £10,080 on the basis of the anticipated maximum 60 users at any one time, with a per person tariff amount of £168 outlined in the evidence behind the SAM tariff, which links to housing numbers, so members will be very familiar with the SAM's contribution, which relates to the number of dwellings created. But this total amount will be required to be transferred to the SAM's account prior to the determination of the application, as per the recommendation in the report. So the recommendation is not changing, but the clarification is just on the financial amount. In addition, just for members' information, the planning application for 130 Alpha Road, Birchington, which was deferred to officers last month to seek amendments, will be reported back to the committee at the December meeting following the receipt of amended plans and consultation with the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That means we're moving on to agenda item 4, which is application for approval, and it's the application for a non-material amendment to planning permission FTH 25 1085, site of former Dane Valley Arms, Dane Valley Road, Margate. I will now hand over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This was the site, so former Dane Valley Arms, located on the corner of Arlington Gardens and Dane Valley Road. The application originally approved was for a 4-storey building accommodating 13 flats and for 4 dwellings. This is the site here, and this is the drone shots of it. So it's currently under construction. So you can see these are the dwellings on the left, the flat block on the corner here, and then this is taken from Dane Valley Road. So the change referred to through this application is in this elevation here at ground floor level. This is another view. So the proposal is for a small louver to go within the east elevation of Block B, which is this elevation here. So it faces towards the internal access road. The louvers needed to provide additional ventilation to the bin and bike store lobby area in order to meet fire regulations. This is the existing view of that elevation. This is the proposed, so this is it in this location here. It's proposed to be metal of a rail colour to match the approved windows and doors. As you saw from the views, it's not going to be visible from a public viewpoint. It's very small in size and doesn't significantly impact on the design of the building, and therefore it's considered to be a non-material change, and it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation for approval is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers? Nope. In that case, we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation to approve to the vote. Those in favour, please indicate. That's carried. Thank you. So, moving on to agenda item 5D, application to defer and delegate, which is the land at Hodges Gap Promenade, Margate, Kent. I have, speaking in favour of the application, Ms Natalie Glover, representing the applicant TDC. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This project forms part of the Margate Town Deal programme. Through engagement and evidence, the scheme was allocated central government funding in 2021 to help people benefit from Margate's seafront as a means of reducing health inequalities, with a focus on supporting amenities and activities related to boosting physical and mental health. The Town Deal also includes plans to reinstate the historic lift down to the promenade to make the new amenities more accessible. The proposals will provide the local community and visitors with much needed facilities to serve the ever-growing number of sea swimmers and bay users, including a small cafe, toilets, showers and a flexible activity space to promote health and wellbeing activities. The project is designed to complement existing uses and to improve access to the listed tidal pool, in particular for winter swimmers, with people needing a warm space after swimming and the need to access toilet facilities nearby. Together with the reopening of the lift, the project will make the bay more accessible for families, the elderly and people with a disability or mobility issues. The cafe will also create jobs and improve natural surveillance on the promenade to mitigate antisocial behaviour. The flexible activity space will facilitate community uses. Public consultation and stakeholder engagement have been at the heart of the design process every step of the way. We've had support from swimmers, residents, community groups, local businesses, the neighbouring Coast Guard station and ward councillors. Comments and suggestions have been considered and incorporated into the design where possible. The building has been designed sympathetically to both the surroundings and existing uses, such as sea swimming, the community sauna and health and fitness activities. Careful consideration has been given to this development with mitigation measures to reduce flood risk, which dictated the exact site on Hodges Gap, minimise any ecological impact and also to reflect opportunities for biodiversity enhancement. The proposals have been through the process of formal pre-app, an independent design review and extensive ecological and flood risk assessments. There have been a lot of support for the scheme, but we acknowledge that some people have expressed concern about the displacement of vehicles currently using the promenade for unregulated parking. As outlined throughout the application, the supplementary information, there are no designated parking spaces at Hodges Gap. Therefore, this development is not removing parking. Boulders are being proposed to prevent any parking directly in front of the new cafe buildings. The addition of new disabled space is also included as part of the proposals. No change is being proposed to the management of the promenade outside the site boundary as part of this planning application. The Council's parking team, beach and coast team and Kent County Council Highways have all been engaged and consulted as part of the application. Overall, the project will improve accessibility to the coastline for all by providing basic but essential infrastructure, including the warm spaces, showers and toilets that local people say they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against the application, Ms Lisa Harris, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. A wise person once said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I have 3 minutes to put forward the strong opinions of hundreds of people I've consulted, as well as the people sat behind me. These are residents, beach users and swimmers, some of whom have used the pool for over 60 years. Their reasons are many, but that one sentence sums it up. Margate benefits from regeneration. I'm hopeful for the winter gardens and the skate park, but these are existing structures which benefit from activation. A new 2-storey building has no demonstrable need and is out of keeping with the natural surroundings. I'll share 3 material objections. Firstly, it's detrimental to the environment. As you've heard, there'll be charges incurred for that. We need rewilding, not redevelopment. The coastline is SSI, SAC, SPA protected, and the scale of the development is inappropriate for the site. Margate has a huge litter problem. Do we want Walpole Bay to look like Main Sands after the bank holiday? This development is in a high-risk flood zone 2 and 3, which will only get worse in the future. And HRA advises that wintering birds will be disturbed, which should only be ignored if there's overriding public interest, which there is not. Secondly, it makes the beach less accessible, not more. Approximately 15 parking spaces will be lost, and pushing people with mobility issues further away from the pool and putting swimmers at risk of hypothermia. The blind corner and single lane access down the hill and in front of the cafe will be dangerous. It's already a really heavily used area, as the traffic survey showed. Toilets will be open during cafe hours, but that won't service the 70 so or more people who use the space before 8 a.m, many of them as early as 6:30. Finally, it's not the right place. If this plan was lifted from the Oval Bandstand and plonked on Walpole Bay, it just isn't needed in this area. 5 cafes are already within minutes. And let's be clear, this is not a community centre. It's a 2.5 metre wide shipping container with no central heating. It's not heated. Will people go down there in the middle of winter when there's 12-foot waves like on Monday? Importantly, ongoing maintenance is a concern. The sauna and jet ski cafe have been vandalised, and a 10 p.m. lighting curfew has been advised to protect wildlife. And if the vandals don't do it, the waves will. Walpole Bay is a thriving, self-regulating community. It's one of the last remaining wild places in Thanet. Why is the council overdeveloping a triple protected area when 3 against 1 respondents on your portal say they don't want it? Sensitive, low-impact basic amenities like ecological toilets and improved waste might be workable if we look to somewhere like Samphire Hoe, but this project does not bring long-term economic growth. I urge you to reject this planning permission or significantly reduce its scale if you want real coastal well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Planning Applications Manager to outline the report. Oh, no, it's not. Further down the line. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Did you say you wanted to ask questions? No, once the presentations are over, it is only the officers that speak, and then the members of the committee get to debate. There are no further opportunities to speak or ask questions from the gallery. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red. The blue areas you can see is Upper Land, which is in the same ownership. So this is an aerial image of the site. So the site is in this, the application site in this location here. So we've got some photos of the site. So this is the application site. Looking the other way at the application site. And we have views down onto the application site. And another view down, looking down onto it. and you can see the Walpole Bay tidal pool in this location here, which is a Grade 2 listed structure, and it is adjacent. The application site is not within, but it's adjacent to a conservation area. So this is a block plan for the proposed development. The application site is in this location here. The Walpole Bay tidal pool you can see to this location here. And as has been mentioned, the proposal is for a 2-storey cafe in this. So this is the cafe building, a single-storey community building, and a single-storey toilet block with external showers. There is support for provision of new community facilities within the local plan at policy CMO1, and further support for such development at beaches in particular, including Walpole Bay, in policy E10 of the local plan. So it is considered there is in principle support for this development, and it is considered acceptable in this location. So looking at the ground floor, we have the cafe in this location here, the toilet block in this location here with the external showers that have been mentioned, and this is a community space and the disabled parking bay in this location. So looking at the first floor, this is the ground floor, a coloured version of it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but excuse me, in the gallery, your voice carries around the room, and your voice carries around the room, and it means that it's disturbing members who are needing to listen to what the officer says. I need to ask you to keep quiet. Thank you. There is no further input from the gallery. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So just looking at this coloured visual of the ground floor. So this blue area here is the cafe area with its kitchen in this location here. The toilet block is this green area here and the external showers. And you have the community space in this location here. So looking at the first floor, the community structure and the toilets are both single storey, so we're looking at roofs, but we have an additional area of cafe on the first floor here. And that's, again, you can see the cafe area in this location at first floor level here. And this is just the roof plan. And again, love a roof plan. So this is the front elevation. So this is the community structure in this location, the main cafe building here, and the toilets and the external showers that you would see as you walked along the promenade. This is the front elevation, a street scene here. You can see there are ramps up to the various structures, so they are accessible once you are down on the promenade. And again, looking at the front elevations here, this is some of the examples of the materials that are proposed for the structure. So there are different types of materials. There's metal cladding in the community building, timber cladding. There is timber and also metal and a variety of materials that will be used. This is the rear elevation that would be essentially against the cliff, so you won't get many views of that. And just some side views of various parts of the scheme. So that's the side elevation of the cafe, the other side elevation of the cafe, the toilet block elevation with the cafe behind, and you can see a shower there which have been mentioned and talked about. And this is the community structure here. So members will have noted that from the report that the applicant, and from the presentation that's been given, that the applicants have engaged with the council's design review panel, and the buildings, as has been mentioned, will be constructed from a variety of materials, including metal, timber and stone, which are all considered to be acceptable in this location and have an element of seaside and traditional materials that are considered appropriate for this location, and the conservation officer raises no objections to those materials or to the development in this location where historically there were facilities for leisure and other activities historically. So just to summarise, members, the proposed development would bring additional facilities for leisure and tourism to the area, which are not considered to have an adverse impact on the character or appearance of the area or of adjacent heritage assets, so no impact, unacceptable impact on the adjoining conservation area or the Grade 2 listed tidal pool. There would be no adverse impact on the residential amenities of nearby residents or on flood risk or drainage. In terms of highways and parking, you've seen photographs, and it is noted from this aerial image that vehicles do park on the site and on the surrounding area. But there are actually, as has been mentioned, no formal designated parking spaces. And in fact, the parking on the promenade is not permitted under the Thanet Beaches and Coastal Public Space Protection Order. The development would exclude vehicle parking within the site boundary, but it is considered that the site is in a sustainable location and parking on surrounding roads is largely unrestricted. And there will be parking and access available to park further along down towards the surf school, so that would remain available. So given this and the limited scale of the development proposed, as well as the existence of the Public Space Protection Order, it is not considered there would be an adverse impact from the proposed development on either highway safety or parking in the area. Biodiversity net gain is not required in this instance, given that the application is hard surface, but as has been mentioned, there is additional impact recreational activity associated with the development, and as such it is considered appropriate, as has been mentioned, to secure the contribution under the SAM plan to mitigate against that impact. So the recommendation is to defer and delegate to officers for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the transfer of the required SAM contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers? Councillor Packman first.
Thanks. Just some clarifications around, I don't know if officers can answer this, because I can't obviously ask you questions, so sorry. Is this a building or porta cabins? Or a mixture of both? That's my first question.
It's a mixture of both. Storage container is the community space, and there's a structure that's sort of built adjacent to it in terms of the use.
So it's a mixture?
Yeah, it's a mixture, yeah.
So we're building on porta cabins, theoretically?
Well, if in terms of the actual building that you can see in front of you, the visualisation that's provided, you can see there are a number of structures, and then there's a storage container which has then got the roof built over it as part of the design, which is the community space that's put in.
Okay, thank you. My second thing is, has consideration been given to the cliffs and the state of the cliffs? Because we know cliffs can deteriorate, erode and fall. So does this pose a safety risk to the public, or has that been considered?
So as part of the project, rather than being a planning consideration, because the policy, there is no policy that would require us to look particularly at that issue precisely. However, obviously as part of the project's generation, we understand the Coast and Foreshores team have been involved, and obviously they are responsible for that side of things.
Great. And then my final question is, we talk about parking. I think parking here is probably the most consideration that we need to look into on the public perspective. Is there going to be a strain on parking during peak times here, bearing in mind there's no provision for parking apart from relying on the jet ski world land, because we've got a doctor's surgery and a Coast Guard facility directly above, and we've got residents that live opposite. So has there been any consideration on that?
So we've consulted with KCC Highways, and the comments are in the document. in peak times along the coast in Thanet, just generally, there is going to be concentrations of parking. In terms of the road above, which is where the doctor's surgery is, obviously the doctor's surgery does have spaces, but clearly there is parking that occurs along the road. It is a road that does support parking on both sides with the ability of two cars to clearly pass because it's a very wide carriageway. So in terms of impact on the wider network at peak times, there may be there would be an increase in parking if this facility is a success and it draws that. But there is, Annabelle, sorry, could you go back to the aerial image? Is that all right? Thanks. There is still, obviously you can see the sort of unregulated parking that's occurring here. There is still not just the parking that's at the Jet Ski World part, but to the, I suppose it's, if I just borrow your mouse, sorry, thanks. In terms of
I'm sorry, please, I do need to remind you that we need to be quiet in the gallery, please. Please. Otherwise I will have to stop and ask people to leave, and I really, really don't want to do that. I never want to do that.
I can pick up the points that are being raised, to be clear. So you can see where, on this plan here, which is the block plan, you can see where the disabled space is, where I'm circling with the mouse. That's the limits of this application. Okay, so the jet ski area is round the corner. Okay, so there is this stretch along here where nothing is proposed through this application, that those boulders to designate the route through there do not go outside of this red line as part of this application. So what happens with that area of parking is not the concern of this application. Obviously, we are only considering the fact that this area will not be able to be parked in once this development goes forward. So there is other bits of parking available, but it comes back to the point about, is this a location where there is parking in the area? Of course, in any peak, there would be an increase, but there is parking, on-street parking available above for people to walk down the slope to the site.
Can I just come back?
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So, is it for us as a planning committee, and forgive me, I'm still quite new to this process, is it for us to consider if the applicant has considered the impact to the residents and doctors and whatever in this application, because they've only allocated one disabled space? So is it for us to consider, have they considered a knock-on effect, an impact on local residents and things like that?
So the consideration is, does this facility result in an increase in car parking to the severe detriment of highway safety or the free flow of traffic? And it's got to be severe detriment. That's the important qualification in terms of the MPPF. In terms of parking available in the area, there is parking available in the area. Whilst there, as I say, there may be peaks. In terms of the use of this area, which obviously is heavily used at the moment at points, it isn't considered that there would be an actual evidential harm that we could sustain as a reason for refusal, that this would result in additional parking that would cause those highway safety concerns. And obviously that's something that is reflected in the highways comment that we've got from the statutory consultee.
Thank you, Chair.
While we're on the subject of parking, I'm going to throw my own question in. I note that this has been referred to as unregulated parking. Do we know for how long a period it has been common practice for unregulated parking to be happening in this area?
I don't know, but I imagine there are all sorts of reports about some time being, it's being used, and obviously obviously a number of residents have used it for different purposes, including obviously accessing the tidal pool. But again, the enforcement of the order and the fact that there is, the order has been in place for a few years, it does mean that it is similar to a situation where if you've got unregulated parking occurring on a site, that residents, we had it with the site round the corner for the Rise Centre that you may recall, we had residents parking on the bit of land that was there, which could just cease. So in terms of the weight to be given to the parking, it doesn't have as full a weight as if it was an actual car park in terms of our considerations.
Thank you. I had Councillor Green next.
I've got a couple of questions. Is this the first time that this plan has been presented to the public, or has the principal been consulted on before? And my second question is, if that is so, then has the viability of the cafe been considered?
The proposal has been through various consultations as part of a Levelling Up project, and it has been in the public domain for some time. In terms of the viability, that is within the remit of the regeneration team and the requirements that they have in terms of reporting about the use of government money. So in terms of the viability side of things, that's not a consideration for us at Planning Committee, but it certainly has been a consideration for the regeneration team and indeed whichever relevant body it is within the council in terms of councillors that may well be assessing where that grant goes and that grant is spent. But it's not for the Planning Committee because it's not a planning consideration, the viability of the project.
So there has been a consultation in principle previously, yeah?
I understand so, but again, that's not a relevant planning consideration either.
Councillor Matterface.
I've got a couple of questions. Could you go back to the colour drawing, please? Because my question relates to the one with the people and things in the background. Oh, it's a long way. Sorry. My question is, how wide is the promenade? It looks incredibly wide looking at it. And you can see some boulders, which obviously are to stop parking. So we can't actually see the edge of that bit of the promenade. So when you've got those buildings and then you compare it with the block plan, there seems to be some discrepancy to my eyes in how wide it is. So do we have any idea how wide the site actually is and how much of the space will be taken up by these buildings? I think the block plan comes subsequent. And then looking at where the aerial picture with the cars, it doesn't look an enormously wide site. My concern is whether it's been slightly generous and how much land there is there compared with what the other block plan. Sorry, that sounds a bit convoluted, but I want to know if what is being proposed is actually maybe more than this bit of promenade could accommodate.
So in terms of the size, if you're taking the measurement from the edge of the sort of stepped area, so I'm going to circle it with my mouse, to the actual sort of line of the promenade, you're looking at 8.5 metres. Okay, so in terms of the width, or sorry, the depth, I should say, there, the aim, and this is the diagram to look at, is to ensure that there is the ability for a minimum of one vehicle, but actually two vehicles to pass between the boulders. But actually, it's a sort of single lane is what it's indicated to give. But you can see there on this drawing where there is the space that's in blue and shaded for a vehicle to park for loading, unloading, with regards to delivery to the cafe, that sort of thing. So in terms of the protection of the pedestrian route as well, the purpose behind the boulders, if you're looking to the north of the boulders in this area where the green dotted line is to give adequate separation so that you can have pedestrians walking along without any interaction with the vehicles. Obviously at the moment it's the unregulated parking area, so you've got vehicles and pedestrians mixing in that area.
I just asked what the purple line is because I can't read that from here. What the purple...
Sorry, when you say purple, I'm slightly colourblind, but I'm gonna go that, is it the pinky bit that we're talking about, or is it the green line? Oh right, okay, sorry. Apologies. It sort of looks blue to me, but it's a vehicular access. It's just basically indicating where the vehicles could go to get to the jet ski world and that sort of area. Yeah.
Councillor Wing.
I think I'm probably the only member in this room who has been in the sea 3 times this week, mainly at the Western Undercliff. But I do know this site, and I do swim at this site when I can't hit the high tide at the Western Undercliff and it's low on this side, or if we've got bad weather at the Western Undercliff, then there tends to be better weather on the Margate side. And I got really excited about it, and then when I was looking through the plans, I saw it was on down below, and I just don't think the site is sustainable or viable. Do we have a high tide mark because my understanding of that site, and I very rarely go there at high tide because I don't think there's a beach at high tide, is that most of the beach is gone, and when we have particular storm weather and the winds are coming in a certain direction, then a lot of our coastline actually gets water ingress onto the promenade. So I don't see how either the building is going to be sustainable going forward and we're going to be able to manage the storm and weather damage. I seem to remember an issue with porter cabins in Broadstairs. The Sea Scouts was a bit of an issue. I do sort of, and again, I think the key is wild swimming. You know, if you like dipping in the sea, you don't really spend an awful lot of time there. You go to the sea, you get in the sea, you might hang around for a bit in the summer, but it's more about that initial quiet, peaceful experience in the sea, uncluttered by this sort of stuff. I could, if this was on the top of the cliff, I could totally see how it would work. And I'm with Councillor Matterface. It's a very tight site. I do take my van down there and park because I can make a cup of tea in it afterwards. But I don't see how, and it's not the sort of site where we should be encouraging lots of people to go there. I'm also quite concerned that we don't seem to have had or heard any impact on the sea and the wildlife of the sea. So I regularly see turnstones there. They're under threat. This is going to increase disturbance, and it's right by the sea. On the cliff top, there would be less of a disturbance. So although I think it's a good idea to try and improve facilities for sea swimmers, I actually think this is in the wrong place. I don't think it will be sustainable going forward. Most people swim here when it's not high tide. Less people swim in the winter for obvious reasons, so I'm not quite sure why anybody would go down there to use a cafe if you weren't swimming, because most of the time there's no beach anyway. So I just, my concerns are around sustainability, managing the building going forward in terms of how do we maintain it, how do we protect it from the sea, how do we protect it from vandalism, because it's a very isolated site, and then also the impact on the wildlife, which doesn't seem to have been taken into consideration.
Thank you, Chair. So just wanted to come back on a couple of those points. So in terms of the sustainability side of things, I think I'm correct that the reference to sustainability it comes back to Councillor Green's point. It's about viability. So again, the proposal is in accordance with our policies in terms of this sort of development being to support Thanet beaches. So from the planning perspective and looking at the policies, there is no principal objection. In fact, there's principal support for this. So in terms of the viability, whilst I appreciate that may be a concern of members from a council project perspective, it's not a consideration that can be taken account of when making a planning decision. In terms of the question about overtopping, there has been a flood risk assessment that's accompanied the application. It is different when it's not a residential proposal about how high it has to be above the ordnance datum level to actually look at whether or not it's going to be acceptable in terms of any risk of flooding, and it has been shown that in terms of the heights that have been proposed that it would be sufficient in terms of a 1 in 200 year event. So it does accord with the requirements when it comes to that side of things that allows you to build there. Obviously there is activity that occurs there, and there's obviously the building around the corner as well that's already there, and that goes to the point about disturbance and the impact on protected species. So there has been work done on this, which has been submitted as part of the application, which KCC Biodiversity have given a view on looking at it being the ecological assessment of it. In terms of the contribution towards the SAMS project, that's something that is made provision for in policy. There is activity down there at the moment. So I think it's really important that we are not introducing, whilst there is an increase in recreational activity, there is already activity that occurs down there at the moment, and we've seen and obviously the mention that's been made about vehicles, etc. Disturbance occurs right now, and therefore, whilst there is an increase, it has been considered that the mitigation would deal with that, but there is also provision that's been made within the construction management plan, because actually the main impact that we are concerned about is actually when they're building it. And we've had this many times in terms of looking at ensuring that construction times, etc., and looking at how you can avoid too many vibratory impacts in terms of bird species, etc. So that's why there's a condition that's placed upon it. I do want to come back on one point, because I think security has been mentioned a few times. There has been consultation that's come in with the project originally, which went directly with Kent Police to actually propose a number of measures with their designing out crime officer. So there is a proposal, a condition for lighting scheme, which is primarily to avoid an impact in terms of the wildlife, but obviously does allow for an input with regards to what's happening with regards to security. And there are some other requirements that have been built into the project, including certain types of door sets, no recessed areas, a security shutter that acts for the inside the cafe, security lights on a motion sensor and things like that. So as much requirements as we would put on a project like this, that has been done. So in terms of the concerns that have been raised about potentially how this could actually increase antisocial behaviour, on looking at the proposal on its own, it has done everything that we would require any development to do in terms of designing out crime. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of questions really to clarify a couple of things. Sort of one of them raises out of what Ian just said about this is an area that is already used, so by the wild swimmers and others. So there is already an impact. But is this, and this might not be a planning consideration, but is this proposed development the intention to serve those people who already use it, or is it the intention to attract new people to this area, so which would then potentially cause a greater impact on the wildlife? And I'm not sure if that is a planning consideration, but and I've got another question after that.
I think that I can't speak to the precise rationale behind the business case that's been put forward about to gain the government funding. I would say in terms of what planning's considering is that it could be both. It could obviously attract new people down there, and of course, but obviously it will serve the people that use it at the moment in the sense of providing the toilet facilities, the shower facilities, and having the cafe that's there. Now, I appreciate some people might not want to use that, and they might not want that, but it has the, it certainly is not going to discriminate against who it does serve, is what I'd say.
Okay, the other thing, I did want to come back to the traffic and parking, because just help me understand better. So the area covered by this application is the cars shouldn't be parked there, apart from that one disabled space. But cars are able to and allowed to park at other areas along this promenade on either side of this application. It's just so as I understand, there's a jet ski place down there, and is any of that parking accessed via this site? So you can see there's that, what we've established is a purple arrow that going through the middle of the site. So will traffic be coming through that to go and park somewhere where they are allowed to park? And will that be two-way?
So the access, and this is the plan that Amal's got up, the access that's provided through to where Jet Ski World is, obviously is providing the ability to try and separate pedestrians and vehicles, but obviously this proposal can't restrict a right of access that exists at the moment for vehicles to that area. In terms of parking availability, there is, as mentioned in the documentation, and I think as members will probably just broadly be aware of, there is a public spaces protection order which is actually saying you can't park on the promenade, for sort of full stop. The enforcement of that is definitely not within the purview of the planning department. So I'm going to absolutely not comment on that. But what I suppose the point that I was making when looking at where the extent of the red line, And what this application it will do is this will stop parking occurring in the area in the red line. That's, you know, that is what the result will be. But, you know, the point that has been raised is that the parking that has occurred there obviously may have occurred there for some time, but is separately restricted and therefore could be enforced under the protection order, or indeed just generally, and cease today, tomorrow, etc. So we are, though, cognizant of the fact that, yeah, you're producing a new facility in a location which, you know, has the potential to attract new users and generate more parking. But given where it is and given you know, the roads surrounding there, it is, you know, it is a location that does have on-street parking available, and it has not been shown through the survey work that's come in as part of the transport assessment, transport statement, that it would result in a problem. And crucially, we do not have an objection from the statutory consultee, the Highway Authority.
Yeah, no, I get that. So I just wanted to understand that parking shouldn't be, cars shouldn't be parked anywhere along the promenade, is what you're saying, isn't it? Parked from right outside the jet ski place. But cars do park along there, and they're being told, I can't park here anymore because we're going to develop it. But cars can park further along, and because we know they do, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but because we know they do, we're not blocking off this. Because the opportunity could be taken here to increase the number of those blocks out the front and totally block it off.
Well, other than the access to whatever the right of access there is to Jet Ski World, but yeah, I mean, again, we're restricting the consideration to the area in red rather than further on, I suppose. Yeah, what happens with that land is a separate consideration. The land to the east before you get to Jet Ski World.
Councillor Matterface.
I was going to say, at the jet ski world, they need to have parking because they're bringing their jet skis in on trailers, and it does say quite clear there's a barrier, parking beyond here exclusively for people with jet skis, because I'm not quite sure how you get a jet ski in the water if you can't take it in on a trailer being pulled by a car. But I mean, they obviously drive along here. But as Ian said, this is a separate issue. But to clarify, people wouldn't be able to drive right along and park at jet ski rather than here because they would be in breach of the agreement with the people there.
Councillor Wing next. Oh, Councillor Green.
Yeah, I have a dilemma because I can't see good planning grounds for going against the officer's recommendation. But if I was the developer here, I would want to see public consultation on the principle now that the plans are available. So it's a bit of a dilemma for me.
Councillor Wing.
I go down that very steep road, which is hairy. I don't like doing it. So I'm confused because I just need to understand, in order to get to Ski World or the parking to the right or Ski World to the left, is that my access point down that steep road? So that's my other concern, that it's an extremely steep road. You can easily lose control. We're creating a situation where we could have toddlers and kids all floating around on the prom. Now you're driving your car. Try it, it's really steep and it's very scary. And we're going down, and we're now in a situation where there's very rarely people there, and the people that are there sort of understand the situation. We're creating a situation where we're putting cars that want to get access there and access there into close proximity with an possibly increased number of visitors down on what is very tight. The coloured picture doesn't really reflect the tightness as you go right. The other thing is, I'm not sure a developer would want to develop this site, and we are developing this site, which I find a bit bonkers. I don't know whether that's a planning consideration, but I can't see any developer wanting to develop this site for access reasons, for sustainability reasons going forward, for the fact that I don't think it's going to have a footfall to make the cafe viable for anybody to lease. That's my problem, but you know, there's now a massive safety issue that you've confirmed. In order to get to Jet Ski World, I've got to go down that slope and go left.
Before I bring Mr Livingston back in, I'd like to add a part of a question to that. Can we have an aerial picture of the access that has been referred to and the Jet Ski World within that, which is probably a Google Maps from here? I think that would be useful for everyone concerned. And just to comment on Councillor Matterface's, this is purely from my own experience of having been down to Jet Ski World. The jet skis, once they arrive at the beach, they are launched by Jet Ski World, and so if they can get them there without a trailer, if they've got the really small ones, but generally yes, you can only get the really tiny ones. You can. I've seen it. But yes, so they do need trailers to get down there. Yeah, that's just giving them a chance to find the maps as well while we're waiting.
What, can I just say, is there any possibility we could go and look at the site and get? I mean, we're looking. Councillor Wings talked about access down a slope. I've talked about people driving through to the jet ski. I mean, is it worth going and have a look?
We'll come back to the possibility of a site visit as we go through, but for now, I'm going to hand back to Mr Livingstone.
So to pick up a couple of points there, so the access via Hodges Gap is an existing access. It's an existing slope. It's used by cars. It's clearly used by cars, as per the aerial image, and obviously by the comments that are made. This doesn't make that situation worse. It doesn't, in terms of if you're restricting the number of cars that will go down there, it makes it better, arguably, in terms of uses, and you'd be getting people walking rather than driving down via a vehicle. In terms of the concerns for those vehicles that do go down the slope, obviously the point about, sorry, I might not be on the right slide, but in terms of the, I'll come back to the other one. In terms of the point about the that was raised by this plan, is the idea behind the boulders is to delineate the areas, even if you're not changing the surface material, to allow a separation between pedestrians and vehicles. There is no separation at the moment. So in terms of, again, actually talking about what is the harm from this proposal, there is no evidential harm that could sustain any sort of reason for refusal against the development for this sort of safety concern. It's not one that's been identified, as I keep coming back to, I'm afraid, in terms of the Highway Authority, and again, it's an existing relationship. In terms of the point that Councillor Crittenden, you mentioned, just so, yeah, in terms of an idea, the area that we're looking at is just past the area where it's a promenade there, where basically the site stops here, where the mouse is going, and then the bollards for jet ski world are here. So again, you know, it allows vehicles to go through the site as they do at the moment to be able to access all the rest of the area. In terms of the point that's been raised about the size of that gap, you know, it does allow for two vehicles to pass in front of the cafe, as shown by the measurement, and even in those instances as well. You know, the point would be in terms of, is the size of the structure going to cause harm to the character appearance of the area? We don't think it does. It's obviously, it's a very local impact, because obviously you have to be down on the promenade to see the development itself. So we don't think there's harm on that side of things in terms of the character of the area. And again, there is adequate space for vehicles to go through there. It really is no different from the cars that are parked there at the moment, having vehicles move through that space. It's acknowledged that there may be more activity because of the cafe, but there is no evidence to suggest that this will cause a severe impact on highway safety from users, especially when you add in the delineations that are being put in by the boulders in there. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to make a comment. I don't often comment, but there are things that have come that I'm concerned about that haven't come up. I think the boulders look like tripping hazards, and I think cars are going to hit them because there's, especially where it gets narrow. I'm very concerned about the narrowness and the low height of the boulders. And the pedestrian line is the opposite side of where the actual amenities are, which means that you're going to have people crossing backwards and forwards between them. So I am very concerned about the existence of the boulders and looking at them from those images. So that's, just want to raise that.
So that is something that Highways looked at, and obviously there's this further section that you can see in terms of the actual height of being, it's about 0.5 metre in terms of the height of the boulders that are being proposed. In terms of it being a tripping hazard, that is, I suppose, whilst it may be a concern that can feed into the project in terms of whether or not that part of the development goes forward, it's certainly not something that, again, in and of itself is substantial enough to raise as a concern. Ultimately, it is a user issue rather than something that we could hang on, again, a refusal for the benefits of the scheme, which, whilst maybe not felt by people that have commented this evening, it is a case that there's policy support for this in the local plan, and therefore, that does provide a benefit that members do need to weigh against the considerations or concerns that they've got. But Highways have looked at this, and again, they've seen this cross section and said that it's not a concern that they would require them to be removed.
Councillor Packman.
Yeah, sorry to come back in again. I agree with Councillor Green that I think this is a dilemma that legally and policy-wise that we're going to struggle to refuse it. But I really struggle to hear what the officers are saying, that Highways have recommended there's no problem, but there's what Highways think and there's what the real situation actually is. They're probably not local people. We know already it's used and it's quite busy. Add in a cafe, a little kid with an ice cream running across the road is one thing that's going to happen. My other concern is, why is the disabled parking the other side of where the entrance is? So someone with a disability has got to drive through a crowd of people to park their car, come back with jet skis. It just gets very, very busy. Now, I'm more concerned about the peak times next summer. You go down to Botany Bay, which has no cafe, or it has a very basic cafe, should I say. It's rammed. Put in a cafe in a place like this with all the jet skis turning around and coming in and out, children running around with ice creams, dogs running around, all sorts of stuff. And then you've got to think about the swimmers that regularly use it, that just go down there for a bit of well-being and a bit of mental health piece and whatever. So I'm a bit dilemmaed, if I'm honest, because I think policy-wise I don't think we have a ground, but morally, I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. I think, to the point, the officer recommendation, relates to the approval on the basis of, again, the highway comment that we have. I think it is important that it's the professional view of KCC. I understand what you're saying in terms of they might not live locally, but in terms of the consultee, it is irrelevant, and it is the point about the consideration. It's irrelevant in the sense of, important to note, about what you're looking at is the evidence behind any objection on a highway safety ground. Whilst this may create activity, there is existing activity down there. The application does clearly and evidentially enough to try and look to separate between pedestrians and vehicles. If it is busy, I understand that the worst case scenario is it's incredibly busy and there are lots of people there and not. What I'm struggling to marry up between it is the concerns that have been raised that no one's going to go there and it's totally unviable and it's going to be the busiest thing and therefore there's a reason to refuse it on highways grounds. And I think we have to put in place through planning the structures that we have of, okay, there is a disabled space that's provided. In terms of the location of that, obviously that's primarily related to the community space. It's also to ensure actually that there's the maximum depth for turning. If you look at where it is on the plan, every other location along there is where there is the depth is less than where it is. So I accept the point that it's not as close as you can get to the tidal pool or to the cafe, but obviously it's about manoeuvring and the space that you'd have in terms of manoeuvring. In terms of the segregation between pedestrians and vehicles, again, there is no segregation at the moment, and whilst we're increasing the activity, they have put provisions in place to allow for that.
Sorry, just on that, but currently there's no cafe.
Yeah, no, I accept that point. I accept that point. But again, there is only so much that you can do in planning, in a planning consideration, to ensure that public safety is encouraged. This is not an unsafe arrangement, evidentially, on a policy basis, on a planning policy basis. In terms of people using the space, then obviously that is in part everyone's responsibility, but the responsibility of the individuals as well. So it's really important that members look at the policies in place about highway safety, and we go back to the statutory consultee, which should be given great weight in the determination of any planning application, that haven't raised a public safety concern about the layout of this scheme.
Thank you. I do still, this is really, I know as chair, maybe I shouldn't be raising it, but I still have a difficulty with the element of the business case because I'm not yet entirely convinced of what problems this development is intended to solve. And I appreciate that that's not a planning consideration. So having said what I've said, it's not a planning consideration. I don't have any other speakers waiting to speak. We have had one suggestion of a site visit, and only one suggestion of a site visit. I would remind members that if you want a site visit, you need to vote against the officer recommendation, and we will then move to a second motion, which will be for a site visit. So if you're in favour of it, you vote in favour. If you're against it or want a site visit, then you vote against in both of those situations. So I will now put the motion to approve the officer's recommendation to defer and delegate, which is in effect to approve, and they will finish off delegating the various aspects of it, to the vote. So those in favour, please indicate. And those against? And do I have any abstentions? So that means it falls. So hang on 1 minute. So I will move the motion that we go for a site visit. Does anyone want to second that? So, Councillor Matterface, and would those in favour of a site visit please vote? Yeah, those against, and any abstentions. So, site visit is carried. So I'll remind everyone that the site visit is on the 5th of December. Lovely weather, I hope that we get for it. Would you like to go swimming while we're there,
Yes,
Councillor?
I was going to suggest bring your costumes and we'll have a little bit of a dip as well.
So just to confirm, the site visit is carried, and that will be the next stage. Thank you. So that concludes the public speaking for this meeting. Thank you, everyone. I will now call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If any member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads?
Thank you, Chair. We have AO1 North Down House, North Down Park in Market. We got AO2 North Down House, North Down Park in Market again. We have, excuse me.
One of those is listed building concern.
And one of those that I've mentioned, AO1 and AO2, is regarding a listed building. We've got AO4, 3 Addington Street in Margate. And the last one is DO6, which is 10 to 13 Edgar Road in Margate.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendation? Councillors Rattigan and Rozecki as seconder. Would those in favour please indicate? Do members agree? So that's agreed. Thank you. So for the benefit of the public, I will now call upon the clerk to read out the applications that have been determined. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's AO1, Not Down House, Not Down Park, Market. AO2, Not Down House, Not Down Park in Market. AO4, 3 Addington Street in Market. And DO6, 10 to 13 Edgar Road in Market. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and that concludes the business for this meeting, so thank you for your attendance and good night. We have an early finish. Thank you.